So, a friend of mine recently changed my conception of how we can use ChatGPT. And I mentioned, I'm working on a project, a book of sorts. I just want to give language to a feeling, a collection of essays. I was trying to figure out exactly how to find the narrative arc in a lot of things I've already written. When I was going through a lot of my deconstruction process, I would research things and write my thoughts out in somewhat of essay form with footnoting and all kinds of stuff. Not in any particular format, but just there was a lot there in this drive. And I had put it aside for a long time. And anyway, I've been working with it and using ChatGPT to basically say, I have this essay about subject A, this essay about subject B. I'm seeing a connection here. Does this make sense? Or is this too tangential as a connection? And it kind of helps you think things out that way, right? And so I have an account that understands that I am asking questions about Seventh day Adventism. Well, last night I logged out of my account with ChatGPT and I asked the program if it has to agree with you. The way it converses with a question, it'll tell you your question is thought provoking, and kind of pull out maybe what the crux of your question was, ask you if that's what you were talking about, or how that might relate to the previous questions you've asked it in this ongoing dialogue. So it doesn't really agree or disagree with you. It helps you further down the synaptic pathway. That's the guy that drives around in the truck with his dog just barking at everybody on the weekends. Sup, pup? Anyway, I log out of ChatGPT and I say, "Hey, can you disagree with me? Like, can that be a setting?" And it was explaining how it makes its responses. But then at the very end, it said I can be more directly. It didn't say confrontational, but I forget how it worded it. And I said, well, if I wanted to, could I just ask you to play devil's advocate for a period of time? And you do that. And it said, yeah, I could play devil's advocate. So then I started asking it questions about the investigative judgment. And so I presented it with the concept of whether or not the distance of time away from 1844 reduces the investigative judgment to a difference without a distinction. Effectively, if whatever process Jesus was to complete did not happen at the cross, but instead the final phase of that process started in 1844, for the people that were born after 1844, what's the difference? Like, whether you believe you'd be judged at death or the end or ongoing, ultimately the question was, how did you respond to the gospel, right? And I didn't realize I had actually turned the devil's advocate thing on. I just asked it if it was capable of doing it. And it started giving me these like back-to-back comparisons. Here's Christianity in general, broader Christianity. And here's how Adventism looks at things. And it would keep drawing this distinction about how the investigative judgment is about an ongoing examination, whereas broader Christianity does not have that concept. And so I asked it, well, are you suggesting that in broader Christianity, the Christian life is irrelevant? Because that's what it sounded like. And it would say, yeah, there are some once saved, always saved communities, but for the most part, a more Christ-like life is expected to be the fruit of the faith you declare to have, which is ultimately the same thing in the investigative judgment. It's just that examination was the difference. And so I said, does that mean what we do matters. Our works are what ultimately matters, which of course it had to say no, because you can't have a salvation by works posture. And that what the ongoing examination was the great controversy. It was showing the other heavenly intelligences, the angels, the beings on unfallen worlds, that the decisions God was going to ultimately make at the ending judgment were just and fair. It's vindicating his character. It's not whether or not we actually improve, because our salvation is determined by Christ's righteousness, which we get through our sincere effort, whether it works out well for us or not, I guess. And so the point is not to show that we did improve necessarily, but that our decision was respected. Our free will decision was respected to not respond, to not sincerely respond. And then that's why, those people don't get saved. And so I asked ChatGPT who that was for. Who does God need to vindicate his character in front of? To which, again, the angels and other intelligences. So I asked it, well, what would happen then if in the ending judgment there was an angel who looked at the result and decided it wasn't fair? And it said that it was unlikely for that to happen because they'd already seen the issues with questioning the fairness of God's judgment. That's what Lucifer did. And he already deceived a third of them. So the ones that were left were already eye to eye with God and his will and were unlikely to disagree with him. So I said, well, if it's not about them, because they're the ones keeping the record anyway. So if they're keeping the record and they're going to agree with him anyway, then what do they need to see him look at the record for? They're the ones that wrote it down. So it again said, well, this is about the other created beings on the other unfallen worlds. So they'll know that God is fair. I'm like, well, do they not expect God to be fair? And I was like, well, no, they would probably be in line with him too. And so I asked, well, doesn't that just make us, humanity, kind of lab rats? That we're stuck, quarantined with sin, so that they can see what the outcome would come, so that they won't be upset with God when God kills most of us. And ChatGPT got caught in a loop and stopped responding with anything other than links back to the North American Division's website or the church's websites. I had asked it to play devil's advocate, and it ran out of ways to explain the investigative judgment and defaulted to saying, just go ask the church. Artificial intelligence broke, trying to make sense of the investigative judgment.